Ahalya, and I'm one of the contributors at AHH, A Humming Heart. And today I am with Radha Priya, who also is better known, I think, by her moniker, Noni-Mouse. Do people just go around calling you Noni all the time?
Yeah, for sure. So many people do. In fact, I think it's become a thing, right, where people know each other through their Instagram handles more than their real name. That totally happens to me. And plus, I think a lot of my friends also just like migrated to, they were just like, this just fits better somehow. So it's very few people actually refer to me as Radha anymore. Yeah.
So tell us about that. Why don't you just start before we dive into like your entire, your craft and all of that? Why don't you tell us about Noni-Mouse? Like, how did that all happen in the first? Because I think the story and the name itself says a lot about your work. So,
Noni-Mouse is more, actually, it's a take on, or rather slightly different way of writing anonymous. I've always been a massive introvert. I am a shy person that way. And I think it just felt cute to say it that way, really. Like it was, I still remember literally in a conversation with my friend Anurag Tagat, and in fact I said his name wrong. That's not how you say his surname, but we were in a conversation. I told him I think I'm gonna change. I think I want to have this as my moniker, because I feel like it represents me really well. And the next thing I know that I did it, and I feel like it's been a very fair representation of who I am, where I've just been sort of sitting in my own house and just like making works, I think that's been my approach to like my practice, like all along. And rather than, as much as I love performing, being on stage, playing sets, being in all kinds of different venues across the country, it's been, there is just being in the studio, and really it's making it more about the craft, basically, has been always like a priority for me. So I think that way the name sounded cute and yet fitting that way, and plus I'm a very petite person, so I felt like it just fit my personality also. So
I think a lot of today's conversation is going to be about identity, because that's a theme that I think one ties together pretty much every single piece that you've put out until now. And it's like just littered right throughout your discography. And it's fairly obvious that that's also what you're trying to sort of.
Yes. Yeah. I think about that, I feel like I think initially, like in 2019, I think is when I became more active with releasing music, or rather 2019 is when I fully assumed this form of being like this independent musician, producer, artist. At that point, I was releasing like various bits of work here and there, like singles here and there. But I think it's really after that year where I kind of decided that I think everything that I put out needs to have a little bit of a genuine, I wouldn't say genuine is not the right word, but like a more purposeful like intention behind it. Like there has to be a real story behind it. There needs to be a reason why it's out there. Not that music always has to be made with a reason, of course not. But I think I want to be, with some of my records at least, I want to be a little more, centered about them, if that's the way, like a right way to describe them. Like, I just want to have a genuine reason for releasing them. They should serve, like you said, my own story and my own, journey rather as an artist. So I feel like, and you're completely right that way. Like I think as they've come out, they've definitely represented like different points of my own trajectory, as an artist. So that's been very cathartic. Yeah, that's the word.
Like when I said that I wanted to interview you, I think that was the one thing everyone was also really excited about, because I like to think of the way that you interact with your audience as a bit like it has a lexicon of its own. Like you don't call yourself a musician, you call yourself a sound artist. You don't call tracks, songs, their audio products, right? So why not? So can you walk us through that? Like, what is the thought process behind that? And also, have you come up with new like isms on the way to Quasi, I guess?
I feel like, I tell you why, because the thing is, I don't always like, so sure. For example, for the past 3 months, I've just been releasing music like nonstop. But that I'm not always actually working on just releasing music under the moniker Noni-Mouse. Like I'm constantly working. Like currently, I'm actually working on a piece with one of my favorite collaborators, Gia, the movement artist, and I'm also working with another theater artist to develop like a small play of ours. Now, I can't, like the soundtrack that I might write for these, or just the play or the piece that we might deliver or rather craft is a piece basically. So I think working with different mediums kind of changed my thinking about what I'm making that way, that I don't want to think of it. And that is exactly where this whole thing of like having intention came into play. The moment I started, experimenting with these other mediums, I very quickly realized that you can't just do it just like that. Oh, let's just jam around and see what happens. I mean, that's a good way to start, but if you want to craft something that truly has an impact, you have to have a story behind it. You have to have a very refined idea behind it. And I guess it's not so much, I kind of borrowed that thinking from like this other art world that I happen to dive a little bit into what I do, like as a independent music producer. So you're yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like that's why I like to think of every track as a full piece in itself, like as far as like the ideology is concerned, or as far as like the lyrics are concerned, the arrangement is concerned, like it should be able to carry a story in itself basically. So, and maybe it's a little too like heavy sometimes. I mean, I think that's the con of it that everything becomes too serious or everything becomes too heavy. But I guess that's the space that I'm at. Like I'm playing with so many mediums, and I love doing that, and I love borrowing that like I said, that thinking from that side and kind of injecting it here. And I feel like so far whoever I've spoken to or those who've attended my sets and all, those who have managed to pick up on these things have really appreciated this, that that we like that there is something else to discover about the same performance or the same track, that there is another layer to it. So that's where it comes from.
It's also okay if it becomes heavy, because then your name is Noni-Mouse, so it just sort of cancels everything.
It's nothing, you're just like
if anything, you're just like, I can still call him a Noni-Mouse, so it's okay.
Absolutely.
But also, speaking of that sort of, I think one of the other takeaways is also probably the idea then that, like, if you call yourself like a sound artist, right, and you call whatever a release an audio product, I think one of the pros of that then is that you're not sort of limiting yourself now. Like it's not like a box, there's no 4 like lines that you're drawing within and all of that. And the thing that interests me about a lot of your work is also that different elements, right, of say an audio product have they resonate with different genres, right? I mean, you are likened to an electronic artist most of the time, but your tracks, I'm going to say tracks, your tracks.
Yeah, that's completely fine. Yeah. It's like a pronoun, basically. It's the new pronoun.
I am an audio product. But it's basically, like, I mean, say if you even took like ICU, right? Like there'll just be random samples that could be hip hop, it could be ambient, it could randomly just be pop. So, and it ties in because also you've admitted that you listen to all kinds of music, right? So how does the genrefication of music work with your making process, I guess?
I think, I feel like there are lots of things that come into play for that. First of all, I mean, I have like so many musicians. I've also grown up like listening to and learning all different kinds of music, everything from, Western classical to, singing in these a cappella choirs during college, to just being in the school band, like, and those are all, and even things like Hindustani classical. So growing up, I've kind of had the chance and really the privilege to study various forms of music and really participate them like fully. And on top of that, I think, like you just mentioned, I love listening to all kinds of different music, and I've never been able to sort of, I guess, put myself in a box, and I don't like it when other people do it too.
Right.
And that's exactly how this whole thing of the sound artist came also, because I truly believe that I don't look at it from a genre point of view. Again, it comes from, I think it has a lot to do with my process. Like, I don't actually sit in my studio that much to make music. It really starts with like seeing something or coming across something or watching a film, watching some scene in some series, and that being like a starting point of a thought process, and then which kind of translates into some idea or like some voice note, or rather again just some intention, which I think I'll end up kind of almost like imagining kind of the entire track even before I step into the studio, because I'm going to be honest, I'm very restless. I hate sitting on a desk. It's why I never really survived jobs in the past, because I just hated sitting in one place, and I hate sitting in the studio also for too long. So I like to do as much thinking and as much ideating as I can even before I go in there, so that when I go in there, all I have to do is like just like execute, and that's about it. So, and that's the thing, like if you're taking inspiration from all these various elements around from your surroundings, then how does genre even come into play, really? It's rather the technique. So my process and technique really haven't changed, but tomorrow if I'm inspired by my cat as opposed to being inspired by this chili plant that is growing in my balcony or some cartoon, those are such different things, right? Like, and there's no way, or rather, of course there is always a way to do it, but I wouldn't want to necessarily all like manufacture all those storylines through the same genre when I know that I can capture them in a more authentic way in a slightly different kind of arrangement. So since it happens because my approach that way is not very linear. I know so many people love sitting in the studio and just like jamming away for hours. I wish I could do it really, but I don't have the patience for it. So I've always picked up my cues from other places. Like and that's why I feel like I'm so drawn to various kind of samples also, and because I work so heavily with samples also is why all these the kind of influences that you mentioned, or rather remnants of like different genres, they end up coming into play. So yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah. I also sometimes get the sense that it's almost like a stream of consciousness, which now lines up with your process then, because if you're just sort of like picking from these moments and memories or like happenstances, then it is sort of that. But like, I remember when I was in college and I would do stream of consciousness writing, it was one of the most difficult things to craft, because it is not illogical. It still has a logic that you have to really look at. And I think it's interesting because if you're going to then take that approach into music, which is a completely different medium, then, so you're saying everything happens before you get into the studio. Going into the studio is literally just about executing. But what is then the process of creating that logic of a track?
I guess, wow, that's a very, that's a very interesting question. How do I approach making tracks? Like, what am I trying to achieve? Like, technically, I think I feel like there is a moment when you know that a sound, or rather not a sound, a track or a piece feels complete. Like, there's that moment when you hear it and it just feels like, oh my God, this is what I needed to hear today, or rather this is exactly what I was looking for. I feel like I definitely wait for that kind of like euphoric kind of moment with every track, that it just makes sense. This is exactly what it was, and it just makes sense, So for me, having that kind of relationship with that piece is very important, where you can just be so sure about it. It's like, it's not less, it's not more, it's just right. That basically that point. And this is where also I think community comes into play. I absolutely love sending, like, the top 10 people on my WhatsApp, like the amount of bytes that I have sent them from various things that I have made over years is so many. I just love sending them. A lot of times they hear it, a lot of times they don't even hear it. Sometimes I'll hear it and I'll actually go into the chat and I'll hear it back from the file that I sent them in the chat. And that itself will tell me a few new things because I end up hearing it from their perspective, you know? So I love sharing things with other people. Just the whether they say something about it or not, just the sharing part itself, you know, that because when you have to kind of display your art suddenly to somebody else, it puts you in a very different frame of mind. So I think that's why while I love working solo, but this is exactly where having a community also really comes into play. You know, like people around me, producers around me especially, have definitely encouraged me to do a lot of things and try a lot of things, which I didn't think I could do, honestly. So, and they are the ones who I keep sending like, yo, so we discussed this, I tried it, you want to hear it? And so then they will, and probably offer some feedback or something like that. So yeah, nice. It's just a lot of exchange of ideas. So,
yeah. And I want to shift it then, because like you're saying, community inspires a lot of the time. It'll inspire a new idea, it inspires a new project release, whatever. I think we saw that happening with Amelie, right? When you put that out, I mean, can you just, you know, tell our listeners today about how that entire track sort of came about?
So last year I was working with this very interesting organization, like in association with Goethe Institute. They're called Be Fantastic. And essentially they kind of, again, end up doing a lot of these like cross-medium, transdisciplinary projects, which involve like artists from across the country and even beyond India, actually, EU also. So we were, I was a part of this group. We were kind of given the liberty to design or rather develop these AI bots, and we could just give them any personality that we wanted to. So I decided to kind of develop this girl. Her name was Polly because she was this polyamorous AI bot. And her, like, the intention behind her was so the people could talk to her and just learn more about polyamory. But I feel like at some level, I also started questioning the existence of this bot, because at the end of it, the bot was exactly like talking to a person. So, you know, like where does the line, or where does reality and like, you know, synthesis like starts that way? And like, so that's, I feel like I wrote it from that point of view, that tomorrow if we were to give like this poly, or rather this AI bot, a little bit more freedom, you know, what would they really? And it's that classic, like that Pinocchio story where he wants to be a real boy. So I thought that if my bot was to say something tomorrow and operate with more humans, basically, I guess she would want to be a real woman. And so again, super nerdy, but like that's where it really comes from. That and I again, of course, taking inspiration from the film Amélie also, although the spelling of the track is not exactly French. Doesn't have the accent, but like again, the film also revolves around this girl and her kind of different predicaments, rather. So I just kind of, again, like I said, like I just told you, like the process, it just ends up drawing from so many different things, rather. So, and that's exactly what happened on this track also, where it became a story about so many things, but eventually it's a story about a fake girl or a fake entity trying to be a real one. So
yeah, I'm also really interested in the crossover between the technical and the final output whenever something out, because you've had so much experience now, like you're saying, working with communities, working on projects that are not necessarily musical. Like, you know, they have aspects of sound and they'll have aspects like it'll be like an audio project or whatever, but all of it sort of ties into the final output. So how does that, I mean, I guess you've already touched upon it, but how does that play into, like how,
I think, like I feel like why I love doing these projects, not just to be able to play with different mediums, but also to collaborate with people who are not always necessarily from music. Because musicians always come from the same thought process. But like a theater person will actually look at the same thing from a very different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And in those projects, actually, I love to be the one who's kind of observing and just doing my job and just learning from the other person, you know. And I think, again, and this is, again, what I said about community. Like, I am lucky to have a bunch of collaborators who are not necessarily musicians, or rather who work with music, but they are not musicians themselves, you know. And how they do things, what they seek from the art that they make, I definitely have tried to adopt some of those, like thinkings, you know, or learnings or insights rather. Just, I feel like it's very, very inspiring, and it kind of, it puts you in place more than anything else, that, you know, your art isn't the most important one always, and it's in a presentation, it might not always be the one that always connects to people, you know. Somebody might come to a gig or a performance or anything for that matter for a completely different reason, and they might or might not like your music. That doesn't mean that your music doesn't play a role in it, but I think it's in different influences. Basically, I feel like, like the collaborations also definitely have an impact on, again, how I started thinking about making art in the first place, and being very humble about it also. So yeah,
no, that's definitely a valuable process to include in the overall making of it. You know, the one thing I want to talk to you about, and I've been like, pretty much every artist that I talk to these days, I talk to them about this, which is this. I see this a lot with people making any kind of art, right? This idea of relatability, because it's like a saturated idea by now. It's something that I think a lot of people, so like talking about things you should be talking about, or making a kind of music that you should be making. And sometimes it feels inauthentic because maybe it's not your experience and maybe it's not what you actually have a say in. Do you ever feel the burden of relatability in your crafting or in your, in your art? Just because I think invariably you end up tackling things that are part of that larger conversation.
I think, I think this sounds like, what I'm going to say is going to sound like such a cliche, but, you know, if you're authentic about your art, then it's people will also relate to it. But it's true, really, you know, that I think I don't, like a professor of mine told me a long time back, like, no idea is ever original, actually, you know. Everything has come from something. So, if I'm telling a story today about a fake girl who wants to be a real one, that's not something new. Like, you know, it's just a different, it's just a different presentation of the same idea, but it's something that so many people of all age groups can actually relate to. So I feel like, again, as long as I'm able to put a part of myself behind whatever I'm presenting, then I think at some level people will also be able to relate to it. And I think the biggest, I'm really glad you actually asked this question, because so in 2020 I played a gig in Surat, which had a lot of old people actually. And the organizer was very concerned that, you know, like, we booked you, but like, I hope you've crafted your set so that, you know, old people can relate to this, because I'm very sure that a certain amount of like 50 plus people are definitely going to come. I don't actually know if you can call 50 plus old anymore, but so I didn't really change my set, but I told him that, you know, don't worry, I think it'll be fine. I have a feeling it's going to be fine. And it worked. Like, everybody enjoyed what they heard. So many people like came and spoke to me, and like, they wanted to click pictures with me. I don't even know why. Like, you know, producers are not the ones who want to get like, who have their picture clicked or in any way. But and I think the reason why it happens, because I remember that particular set that I crafted had so much to do with my, for example, my Hindustani roots, or rather my earlier growing, the Bollywood music that I heard as a kid, basically. So there aren't any direct references, but you can definitely hear it in different parts. And it gave it that little bit of a sheen that kind of glued it all together. Like, you know, okay, there is something that everybody can find in here and kind of appreciate, basically. So it's not like, of course one can craft things to make them more relatable, and I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it, as long as, again, it's being done with the right intention. But I just think that, yeah, like, I think if it's coming from an authentic place, then I think people will find something. And even if your authentic place is very obscure, that's even better, I think. Like, you know, because I feel like then people are even more drawn to it, that, oh my God, like, what did you have to go through to kind of come upon this one story or this one track, or how did you even think of this? Like, you know, so I feel like whether it's relatable or obscure, I think both are good, as long as it comes from a place of truth. So at least in my experience, that's been the case. So,
and is that like the marker? So like you put something out, do you say like, this was the truest I could have been to myself, and therefore it is a successful release? Is that like the benchmark that you use?
For sure. I think even before, I don't think I would even put something out if I'm not completely like feeling it, you know. Like, I think a lot of times I make music just so I can enjoy it. Like, I feel like I know a lot of artists say this, and I'm so glad they do say this, because like I feel like a lot of music I'm making is something that I want to hear, but it doesn't exactly exist already. Like, I love running to my music. I love like doing chores to my music. So I feel like when I finish a track, instantly I become more of a consumer, I think. Like that, okay, you know what, am I vibing with this, not as a producer, but just somebody who listens to music. So and I think if I'm able to do it, then I've achieved that authenticity, or rather being not like trying to just doing something for the sake of it. And I'm also just very critical of these things. Like, so I feel like anytime I feel like, you know, like, that sounds so corny, I'm not going to do it. So delete. Like, immediately you guys start hitting like backspace. And I just, I feel like if I can vibe to it, then somebody else or a few more people can definitely vibe to it too. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And what about so you were talking a lot about intent, right? And purpose, and that's something that's been like a real driving force increasingly with your music. I guess what I'm trying to say is like your debut EP, right, is about to sort of like I mean,
Actually,
it's not your debut, it's not your debut, but it's I think a consolidated project after a long time, right?
Yes, definitely. It's been the work since last year, or rather, some of the tracks were made even before that, you know. And like, sorry, I will let you finish the question first. yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is, what is the intent with this one? Why did you decide to like that this is the right time to put this one out?
Yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, like, my debut and my last EP basically came out early 2019.
Yeah.
And I just felt like it had been a really long time since I put out like a full-blown record. And also because as a producer, I have changed so much since then. Technically, even again, my process, like I just mentioned, and just generally like how I make music, even when I am once in a while sitting on my desk. So I think I wanted a newer record to kind of represent that. And I feel like, I feel like I wanted a new kind of a representation to like a new chapter that I feel like I've been kind of, or rather new journey that I've been on since last year. You know, like early last year, I think I somewhere decided that I, for example, wanted to definitely make more dance music. You know, although I have released I have made music of other kind also, but progressively all the music that I'll be releasing here onwards will always have elements of dance. So, and I just feel like, because, you know, while I do make music of a lot of different genres, like dance music is the one that kind of gets me the most excited. Whichever form it might be, it can be just it can be just a very obscure soundscape that also might make you dance. Who knows? But I think last year, especially since I played magnetic fields, and after that experience itself, I feel like I was like, I think I want to make more dance music. And I think I want to just focus on that for the next couple of years. And I feel like I need to put out a couple of tracks, or rather a record that represents that. So it's been like I feel like it's been a new chapter for me. Yeah, it's been a new chapter for me, and it's been something new that I'm exploring on how to make slightly more intricate dance music, but also make sure that people dance to it at a venue, which is like it's always like a very slippery, not slippery, but like a very dicey position to be in, because you never know how it goes. And I also play live set, so I don't have the liberty to kind of switch things up at the last minute. But but it's come from the record happened, or rather it's going to come out because it's going to represent this new part in my dance music journey. So yeah.
Nice. Awesome. So then like we can take it from you now that like Quasi is going to be like a dance music EP.
I guess. Sure.
You were standing there, you already put it to a box. I'm making sure. Like I'm asking.
Yeah. No, but yeah, no, definitely. And not just this record, but like I said, I have a couple of more releases planned, and it might not always authentically be dance music, but I try to inject certain elements, a certain that kind of that groove in every track that I've been making or releasing so far. So.
Yeah, I mean, also, like you said before, we would say dance music, but I mean, we'll end up knowing only once we hear what it is, right? Because anything, like you said, dance. So
yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Again, you can dance to it. So I'm hoping people dance to this. So yeah,
I'm sure we will. Very excited about Quasi, and thank you for talking to us today. It was great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.